AAA recently published a report finding that pedestrian detection systems from several respected manufacturers failed to prevent collisions under their controlled tests. The results of these tests, as you can see, are pretty shocking. Every car tested launched dummies, both adult size and kid size, high into the air. They only released the daytime test footage because none of the cars stopped a single time during their nighttime tests, not even once. AAA tested a Honda Accord, a Toyota Camry, a Chevy Malibu, and a Tesla Model 3. I do find it funny that they blurred out the badges on the cars, even though they published the specific make and model of every car tested. Never mind the fact that the cars are pretty recognizable as what they are. Each of the cars was equipped with a pedestrian detection system that uses a combination of radar and cameras to detect pedestrians day and night, as is illustrated in this animation for Honda's collision mitigation braking system. These systems first alert the driver of an impending collision. If the driver does not apply the brakes or the pedestrian is detected too late for the driver to respond, all 4 pedestrian detection systems will apply emergency braking to reduce impact speed or prevent a collision altogether. That's the idea anyway. AAA used industry standard test dummies that are not only shaped like people, but also move like people to give these vision and radar-based systems the best chance of detecting them. Yet every system failed to do so at least some of the time. They also, of course, work some of the time. For every test, AAA measured the distance between the car and the dummy at the moment the car alerts the driver to the pedestrian, the moment the car starts to automatically brake, and the distance between the car and the dummy after it stops. A 0 here means that the dummy experienced rapid unintentional disassembly. Just a quick note to point out that for some reason, AAA did not include any footage of the Chevy Malibu performing these tests, so we're limited to seeing it as a prop for the other vehicles. The full test data published by AAA is where you can see what I think is an even more important indicator of the capability of these pedestrian detection systems. The cars that performed the best at the 20-mile-per-hour daytime tests, the Honda Accord and the Toyota Camry, had very short intervals between alert and automatic emergency braking. Another quick note here, these are AAA's charts. They are the ones that misspelled separation, not me. The Accord only traveled an average of 1.5 feet between alerting the driver and automatically braking. That meant that even in the case where the Accord didn't alert until only 16 feet from the pedestrian, it still was able to cut impact speed to only 0.6 miles per hour. The Camry was extremely consistent across all tests on all 3 measures, with an average interval between alert and braking of only 6.43 feet. That's 5 times the distance traveled between alert and braking compared to the Honda, but because the Camry recognized the pedestrian so early in every test, it had no problem stopping in time to prevent a collision while leaving at least 4 feet between the front bumper and the pedestrian every time. The Chevy Malibu data confuses me quite a bit because this system was the absolute best at detecting a pedestrian in these tests, alerting the driver in 4 of the 5 runs around 70 feet away. That's nearly twice the alert distance of the Camry. Yet it didn't apply the brakes even once. I can't imagine why the Malibu detected the pedestrian but didn't apply the brakes at all. This seems like GM could tweak their braking algorithm and fix this. The Tesla Model 3 data is likewise a real head scratcher for me. It has the most cameras, the most advanced neural net, and the most advanced collision detection software, but it failed every test. However, look how early the Model 3 detected the pedestrian, yet look how late the Model 3 automatically applies the brakes. For 4 of the runs, the Model 3 traveled an average of 22 feet after alerting the driver before applying the brakes. On one run, it alerted the driver 104 feet before braking, only a foot away from the pedestrian. That makes no sense to me. If the Model 3 simply adopted Honda's shorter interval between alert and braking, it never would have hit the dummies on these tests. It's possible there's a reason why Tesla has such a long interval between alerting a driver to a pedestrian and braking. Maybe there's a lot of false positives in this system where braking would cause more risk than it avoids. Tesla Autopilot users all are familiar with something we call phantom braking, where the car will just slow, oftentimes without any obvious reason why it thinks it needs to slow down. Alerts might be programmed to happen when the system has a low certainty that a collision with a pedestrian is going to happen, because a false alert is limited to surprising the driver and the occupants of the vehicle, but that certainty of collision is going to increase the closer the vehicle gets to a pedestrian, and it's probably reaching some kind of threshold where it then thinks a pedestrian collision is imminent, and then it triggers automatic emergency braking. But if that's the case, then that meant in AAA's test, the Model 3 had to be really close to the dummies to be sure that they were there. If Tesla Autopilot actually had to be that close to a pedestrian to be able to recognize that a collision was imminent, I think we'd hear about all the false alerts about pedestrian collisions that such a system would generate. But I just don't see that in any of the forums that I follow. We have our own Ford collision alert set to early, but we haven't had a single pedestrian trigger an alert ever. It's impossible to know what triggers phantom braking some of the time, so it's at least within the realm of possibilities that Tesla Autopilot thinks a pedestrian collision is imminent, even though there aren't people to be seen anywhere. I don't know what causes truly phantom braking, but Tesla does, and Tesla also knows why they program such a long interval between alerting a driver to a pedestrian and applying emergency braking. I just hope that somebody is working on this particular problem so that Autopilot reacts quickly enough to avoid a collision with a pedestrian. They've obviously worked very hard at reducing phantom braking in general because the frequency of it is so much lower now than it was a year ago when we got this Model 3. Looking at the results from the 30-mile-per-hour tests, only the Accord went through the full 5 trials. This is an area where I think AAA made a bad decision, but it was probably because they actually rented some of these cars from rental companies. Yes, they were smashing test dummies and hardware with rentals and giving them back. So if a car slowed less than 5 miles per hour before hitting a dummy in the first trial, AAA did not execute any further trials. If you look at the second trial of the Honda, you see the problem. What if that trial were the first instead? AAA would have ended testing of the Honda right there. But since it was the second trial, the Honda went through all 5 trials. They really needed to do all 5 trials for every vehicle, dummies and paint be damned, to make sure that each car had an equal chance to show what they could do. That gets to the fact that some are calling into question AAA's methods altogether. What confuses a lot of industry people is that Euro NCAP now includes tests of pedestrian detection systems in their evaluations of new cars, and under their conditions, the systems seem to be doing pretty well. In fact, while the Tesla Model 3 never avoided the pedestrian for AAA, it performed like a rock star on the Euro NCAP test. None of the other 3 vehicles tested by AAA have been tested by Euro NCAP, unfortunately, so we can't see if this performance difference is widespread across the 2 testing bodies, or if it's possibly due to different software or hardware on the individual cars. Speaking of software, Tesla can update their software at any time to make performance under these conditions better, even for vehicles that are already on the road. Tesla software updates are free and they're over the air, meaning you don't have to take your car into a service center to get new software. The other manufacturers don't currently have software updates, but it's possible they may offer them to existing owners through their dealership at some point. I really hope that they do, because improvements in this area of software technology can save lives. This brings up a very important issue. Testing bodies need to list the software and hardware codes that they are testing. And frankly, they have got to figure out how to handle the extremely short shelf life that their tests are going to have for Teslas and hopefully all vehicles on the road very soon. Just look back at when Consumer Reports got its hands on a Tesla employee's very early Model 3. When they tested its braking, they found that it took as far as a Ford F-150 to stop. But within days, Tesla pushed brand new software to every single Model 3 on the road that reduced its braking distance by 20 feet. At least Consumer Reports revisited their tests and changed their published information. But to date, not a single testing organization publishes information about hardware codes or software codes on the cars that they're testing. Nor does any testing organization have any sort of protocol for retesting vehicles after software updates. Just think about how crazy that is for testing Tesla vehicles now, and hopefully all vehicles on the road before long. Tesla releases new software every 2 to 3 weeks. I have no idea how often those updates include tweaks to accident avoidance algorithms. Tesla rarely mentions anything but changes to the user interface and additional features in their release notes, but we know that they're constantly changing the driving algorithm because of changes that we can easily see in how features like autopilot behaves. These changes sometimes make things worse, even though over time, updates have made tremendous gains in how a Tesla sees and reacts to the world around it. It's perfectly feasible that a software update could result in worse performance on an accident avoidance test if it were repeated. It's perfectly feasible that that regression is actually part of the software that's tested in the first place. This is a real conundrum for testing organizations that they need to address. I'm really glad that AAA put in the effort to do these tests. As respected as Euro NCAP is, no organization should be the single source of vehicle safety testing, and the contradictions that we see in AAA's tests demonstrate exactly why. Hopefully all manufacturers, and not just the 4 tested, are evaluating these results to come up with better ways to avoid collisions with pedestrians. I especially hope that Tesla is already at work to come up with a way to reduce that interval between alerting a driver to a pedestrian and applying emergency braking. If you're looking to get the updatability of a Tesla for yourself, be sure to use my referral link to get free supercharging. Complete details about the Tesla referral program are found at the link itself. I really appreciate you watching The Tech of Tech, and I hope to see you next time.